Our top story tonight, the Supreme Court upholds the freedom of speech, strikes down Section 66A of the Information Technology Act, terming it unconstitutional and untenable, says even the most unpalatable criticism cannot be scuttled by legislation, but the apex court allows the government to block content online, but after due diligence.
India is one of Twitter's fastest growing markets, says the global CEO Dick Costolo. The company teams up with the Indian government to launch Twitter Samvad, a service that allows citizens to access government services via 16 Twitter accounts of the government of India, including the PM, via SMSs.
If you look at the BRIC countries, India is the growth story that stands out.
JP Morgan's chief global strategist Joyce Chang prefers developed market equities but says India stands out among emerging markets, will see near-term consolidation, though the market continues to witness choppiness, the key indices closing flat but with a negative bias after swinging wildly through the day.
Our growth outlook for India is pretty positive. As you know, we anticipate growth to be 7.8%.
The Asian Development Bank is bullish, and India sees the government's reform drive pushing growth to 7.8% in 2015-16 and over 8% in 2016-17. The ADB says India will outpace China's growth in the next few years.
Upstream companies will know in a day or two if they have to bear any subsidy burden for the fourth quarter. Oil ministry sources say North Block could pay higher compensation and dip into the cushion it has thanks to the excise duty hikes on petrol and diesel.
RBI sends confusing signals on downside protection for FDI investments, rejects Tata Sons applications to buy back Tata Tele's shares from Docomo at a price above the current fair value price.
A German low-cost carrier carrying 142 passengers crashes in south of France. The Airbus 320 owned by Lufthansa subsidiary German Wings was flying from Barcelona to Dusseldorf. French President François Hollande says the possibility of finding survivors looks grim.
The centre approves a 2,000 crore rupee relief fund for areas affected by drought in Maharashtra last year to also extend assistance to Himachal Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, which were hit by floods and landslides.
The Indian farmer continues to struggle despite government-notified minimum support prices for crops. Is the government scheme a failure? A special report from Yavatmal district in the second part of our special series, What's Ailing Rural India?
South Africa failed to shake off the choker stag. Host New Zealand beat the Proteas by 4 wickets in a thriller to create history, make it to the finals of the ICC World Cup for the first time ever.
I don't want people to be scared to say something on the internet when they're not scared to say it in person.
I don't think we should bring politics into it. We should welcome the Supreme Court judgment.
I have been advised to other people that they should not, misuse this law.
गाइडलाइंस नहीं जारी की, सीधे इसको स्क्रैप कर दिया. उन्होंने कहा कि अनकॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल है, यानी कि संविधान में हमें जो बेसिक राइट्स मिलते हैं वो इनके साथ नहीं जाते.
I welcome the verdict of the Upholds court today.
So the fundamental right to free speech and expression has not been sullied. In a landmark judgment, the Supreme Court has struck down the controversial Section 66A of the Information Technology Act. Remember, this section allows for a person to be arrested for posting allegedly offensive content online. The apex court has said that in its current form, the section is vague when it comes to defining what constitutes an offensive remark. However, the court has allowed the government to block websites if their content has the potential to create communal disturbances, social disorder, or impact India's relationship with other countries. Here's more on this landmark judgment.
It's a big day for Shaheen, Reenu, Asim, Gulrez and many others like them who went to jail for posting or sharing allegedly offensive material online. On Tuesday, the Supreme Court of India struck down the controversial Section 66A of the Information Technology Act that penalized and regulated online freedom of speech and expression.
I'm absolutely ecstatic. The Supreme Court has upheld the rights of the citizens today, and it is an enormous thing, and it's a great day for everyone.
The apex court in its verdict has said speech and expression is directly curbed by the creation of offences contained in Section 66A. 66A makes no distinction between mere discussion or advocacy of a particular point of view which may be annoying or inconvenient to some and incitement. 66A fails to define offences with sufficient definiteness. So, post this verdict, all cases under Section 66A will be dropped. But does striking down of Section 66A immunize a citizen against any action for posts made on the internet? The answer is no. There still is the Indian Penal Code, and a citizen can still be hauled up or punished for posting mischievous, hate and defamatory comments on the internet. But not everybody is welcoming this verdict.
There must be some protection for people against defamatory statements.
As a part of the same verdict, the Apex Court has upheld two provisions of the IT Act that permit government to block content online after due diligence. While this judgment spells a huge victory for internet users, it reinforces once again the primacy of freedom of speech. In New Delhi, Ashok Bagria.
Joining us now is Rajiv Chandrasekhar, a petitioner in the case. He's been battling against Section 66 of the Information Technology Act. Rajiv, well, congratulations in order to you as well. I know it's been a long battle, an almost 7-year-long battle, and it's ironical that as a member of the Rajya Sabha, you actually had to move a PIL in the Supreme Court to try and get this anomaly, Section 66, corrected by the highest court in the land.
Yeah, it's one of those ironies, isn't it? I mean, you expect a member of parliament to actually get legislation amended and corrected in parliament, but I tried for many years. This issue was discussed, debated, I raised many questions, many interventions, but was faced with a political class that really just didn't want to budge from its position. And so, you know, like with most things in India now, it's the Supreme Court that steps in and does the right thing when the right thing requires to be done.
You know, but Rajiv, what does this speak of our lawmaking process? And this is just one example because, as you mentioned, there was no debate on this issue in Parliament. In fact, this bill was passed in 7 minutes flat. And look at what we're seeing happen with bill after bill. The land bill, which was passed by Parliament last year, we're now talking about amendments to that land bill. The Companies Act, which was in the making for almost a decade, then was passed in 2013. We're now talking about amending that. What does this say about the nature of lawmaking in this country?
No, I agree. I think for too long lawmaking has been transformed into legislate and spend versus legislate, debate, ideate and come up with a new law and then move on. I think there is a reason why the parliament is a house of debating. It is for different points of view to come together and to improve, expand, modify a law that is proposed by the government. But for too many years now, governments have gotten away with the view that they are the only ones who know what is right for the country, and they go out and legislate and then push it through with sheer, you know, for example, in the case of this 2008 legislation, it was pushed through. I went out to get a glass of water. I remember vividly standing outside the lobby of the Rajya Sabha for 2 minutes, and I walked back in and they said the bill had been passed. And I had actually prepared a debate, I had prepared to speak on the subject, and before you knew it, the bill was law. So I think there is really a larger story here, which is that Parliament and governments must know that there is a need to create consensus around legislation and laws.
You know, taking that point forward now, Rajiv, and let's talk about this law in specific, because a safe internet, you say, and a free internet can coexist, and you are now urging the government to move amendments to the Information Technology Act. What is the kind of amendments that you would like to see? And I also want to point out that while the court has struck down 66A, the court has upheld 79(3)B, and it's also upheld the government's right to be able to block access to certain websites under Rule 69A. So in this context, what are the kinds of amendments to ensure the checks and balances are in place?
Shireen, there has to be clearly two public policy objectives out of any IT amendment law or any new law. One is the policy, which I completely agree with, that there must be a way to regulate misuse of the internet. And there are many forms of misuse. We don't have to get into the forms of misuse, but there is a clear debate around the need to regulate misuse of the internet. But there is a need to balance whatever you do on the misuse of the internet with the right to express yourself freely on the internet. Number one. Number two, the laws on the internet space cannot be at odds with or contradictory or with a larger ambit than the laws in the normal criminal penal code. You can't criminalize people for doing things on cyberspace that they don't otherwise get criminalized in the normal world. So I think there is a need to harmonize these two worlds. The world has moved a lot since 2008. I think the act currently looks very dated and old. There is a need for the government to move forward and create something that is more contemporaneous. And this is actually even more important, Shireen, because this government is the one that talks a lot about digital India, and that is a clear focus.
So if you can give me specifics, Rajiv, if you can give me specifics in terms of the amendments that you would like to see this government move in order for us to be able to harmonize this.
No, look, I think it's very difficult to tell you all of the 100 specifics in terms of unlawful use of the internet. I mean, we all know child pornography, we know pornography, we know inciting and creating communal violence, we know defamation. But the point is that the laws and the criminal procedure for this in the IT space should be identical to laws that exist in the criminal penal code. You can't have these two things being not harmonized. And so it is really also about the process as much as what amendments I'd like to see. I'd like to see a process where we look at all of what exists in the normal criminal penal code and say how much of this already exists and what is it really that we need to legislate for that does not exist in the normal criminal code. There is no need to create laws for which laws already exist.
A quick question, Rajiv, because, you know, in terms of the court actually upholding 79(3)(b) and 69(a), the view is that this will, in a sense, limit the liability of the intermediaries. But what about the responsibility of intermediaries? And we were having a very interesting conversation with Twitter, for instance, that's putting internal checks and balances to stop people from trolling and abuse and so on and so forth. So liability and responsibility, how do you view that?
No, I think what the Supreme Court has done is right, which is to say that the intermediaries can only be asked to offload stuff after a certain diligence. And this has two implications. One is that the government or any entity representing the government just can't ask intermediaries to offload content without passing some hurdle. The second is actually as important, which is the intermediaries don't start playing games with content providers that they are hosting or they are providing themselves as a platform for. So there is an obligation on the intermediary, yes, but this obligation now has been, by the Supreme Court's order, it has to pass a certain hurdle. And it is not just blind as opposed like a phone call from a strange 301 number in Delhi Sanchar Bhavan saying knock this off or knock that off. It can't be as ad hoc, and that is what really the Supreme Court order says.
Well, the government is talking about doing away with discretion in aspects related to natural resources. Maybe we'll see discretion coming down when it comes to take down requests as well. But Rajiv, this is a matter that maybe will be taken up when Parliament reconvenes. What is it that you would like this government to do, especially as you mentioned, Digital India is one of the big planks for this government.
Yeah, I think Digital India, if that has to be a reality, Shireen, and I've written about this and I've spoken about this in Parliament, so this is nothing new. I think there is a lot of things that the government has to alter, change, and have a fresh new approach, very different from what the UPA was doing. And at the heart of it is the IT Act. We clearly we need a new contemporaneous act that talks about innovation, creativity, and really defines the government's role to be minimalistic. We talk about minimum government, it must represent itself in the new law. The government has to be an enabler and a regulator of misuse, but it cannot be big brother in cyberspace.
Well, that's Rajiv Chandrasekhar, one of the petitioners in this case. It's a big day for freedom of speech. The Supreme Court has struck down Section 66A of the Information Technology Act, saying that it is vague and doesn't define what it tends to curb. Now, Twitter's global CEO, Dick Costello, is also in India and has welcomed the government's move to strike down Section 66A. Costello is here to launch Twitter Samvad. It's an initiative in collaboration with the Indian government, which basically allows citizens to connect with various government departments, including the Prime Minister's office, through an SMS. Now, in a special media roundtable, Costello said that India is one of Twitter's fastest growing markets. He also spoke about the microblogging site's acquisition plans outside the United States. Remember, they're being able to do Twitter Samvad through the acquisition that they did in India, Valerie Wagner's Zip Dial. That was the service that is now going to be using, Twitter is going to be using the Zip Dial service now to roll out Twitter Samvad. Listen in.
Court case and the announcement today, that's obviously very exciting for everybody here. I know that Twitter locally has been blowing up about it, and that's great to see. I think we have a great reputation as a company for defending and respecting our users' voices. With regard to abuse and harassment on the platform, I've been very clear internally about internally, and then somebody made that internal clarity external. Clear about our need to do more. That was earlier in the year. We've already done a lot. We've made it a lot easier to report abuse, for third parties to report abuse, and we're really flipping that economic equation and making it harder to be an abuser on the platform.
A primary objective of ours in India is to reach every Indian. We believe that Twitter, a platform invented on SMS, many of you know we just celebrated our 9th birthday. Twitter was invented on SMS, and India being a mobile-first country. Twitter, a platform rich in media. We all know India to be a country rich and having a celebrated media heritage. We really do believe that every single Indian with a mobile device can derive daily value from the Twitter service.
India is one of our fastest-growing countries in the world for user growth. Secondly, it's increasingly clear to me that India is going to be a center of innovation for us as a company technologically. Zip Dial acquisition and our ability to integrate that acquisition and team into the company, and the speed with which we did it and how effective it was, does give me confidence that we can do that again, and that confidence has led me to, I would say, look more broadly at a scope of acquisitions outside just doing them in the U.S. in cities in which we already have offices, etc.
Well, that's Dick Costello, the global CEO of Twitter in India. Prime Minister Modi was one of the first people to tweet about Twitter Samvad, urging people to get all his tweets via SMS by giving a missed call on a number. But that's the number that you can call if you want the Prime Minister to call you back. All right, Nandara.
Let's head to the last street now, Shireen, where volatility very much continued. The Nifty and the Sensex witnessed wild swings in trade before closing in the red for the 5th day on the trot. The Sensex gyrated in a 300-point band, finally losing 30 points to go home at 28,161. The Nifty, that swung in a 100-point range before ending flat at 8,542, down by just 8 points by the end of it. Mid-caps underperforming yet again, that index down by about 0.3%. Let's get an expert view now. Joyce Chang, the global research head at JP Morgan, prefers developed markets equities over emerging markets. Neil Mishra of Credit Suisse also painted a very optimistic picture, saying global investors continue to remain keen on Indian markets, especially in the medium term. That's because Chang said out of all the emerging market packs, Indian equities are the best of the lot.
I think that developed market equities will be preferred over emerging markets this year, simply because we've taken down the emerging markets growth forecast in so many countries. So if you look at the BRIC countries, I mean, India is the growth story that stands out, but you have a deep recession in Russia, a recession in Brazil, and a slowdown in China. I think there's more momentum in place for European equities this year. We do see a European recovery going closer to 2% by the end of the year. I don't think that one should be surprised that there's some consolidation that's going on in India after such a strong rally. And the same thing has happened in the U.S. equity market as well. I mean, we still see positive medium-term prospects over the next 2 years, particularly if we continue to see rates come down, the fiscal stimulus take hold, and the growth numbers continue to hold up well in India. So we are overweight on a medium-term horizon, but do see that you're probably going to stay in this range for right now. The same is true on the FX side. You had a 14% appreciation of the India rupee in trade rate terms recently. So we see a period for more consolidation given how strong the rally has been.
I don't see any waning of interest in India. I do think that people are still looking at the medium term. They're still quite encouraged. I think some of the reforms that finally the government is able to push through in the last month or so, and much against belief that in the Rajya Sabha they don't have majority. I think some of the reforms have been, I think, very encouraging. So I think the interest level remains. It's just that now other parts of the world have started to revive. So on a relative basis, yes, I mean there could be some short-term interest which is going elsewhere as well.
Well, the long-term India story is intact, but in the short term, we could see consolidation. That's the view coming in. Now, speaking of optimism about the Indian markets and the India economy, Asian Development Bank projects India's growth rate to surpass China's in the next few years. It expects growth to improve to 7.8% in the next fiscal and further to 8.2% in FY17. Joanna Boystow, the principal economist at the ADB, told CNBC TV 18's Malvika Jain that the bank is betting on the government's structural reform agenda to improve external demand and fuel this rapid growth.
Our growth outlook for India is pretty positive. As you know, we anticipate growth to be 7.8% and then 8.2% in the subsequent year. And this is really based on the government's strong budget, strong infrastructure-driven budget, which we think is realistic and which has really picked sectors where I think it can deliver. And it is also based on the reforms that the government is, we say the government is willing to tackle politically difficult reforms, and I think we have seen part of that already happening last week.
Well, that's an optimistic view there coming in from the ADB. Now, the government has moved to allow the allotment of 43 coal blocks which fell under the government dispensation category. So remember, these blocks will not be auctioned. The Coal Ministry has received 107 applications from public sector units for these 43 coal mines. The Palma 2 mine in Chhattisgarh has received the maximum interest with 9 applications. Coal Secretary Anil Swarup says the government has allotted 38 coal mines to central and state public sector units. Also, as CNBC TV 18 has been reporting for a while now, most coal mines of PSUs have been retained by earlier allottees. NTPC retains most of its coal blocks in Jharkhand, and Orissa has 42 coal blocks are meant for the power sector. Of the 43 coal blocks in question, 1 coal block is meant for the steel sector, and that has been allotted to SAIL. Anshu Sharma caught up with the Coal Secretary Anil Swarup earlier today and began by asking him about the fate of Schedule 2 and Schedule 3 mines which have not been auctioned just yet.
Schedule 3 is not a problem where mining was not happening. In Schedule 2, wherever the mining was happening and the auction or allotment could not take place, they have been allotted to Coal India so that the mining can continue after the 31st of March.
What will be the design as per which Coal India will be mining from these Schedule 2 coal blocks?
Coal India will get it on the same terms as allotment to the state governments. So they will pay the royalty and the base amount. That will be given by them to state governments, and they will continue with the mining process.
When can we expect the third phase of coal auction, and how many coal blocks will be up for bidding?
The notification for the third tranche of auction should be in third week of April. And there's a likelihood of about 16 to 24 blocks to be put on auction.
16 to 24. What will be the reserves we are looking at for the third phase?
Anywhere between 80 and 100 million tons.
Well, that's the Coal Secretary Anil Swarup there. The centre has cleared a 2,000 crore rupee drought relief package for drought-affected areas of Maharashtra. The decision was taken by the High-Level Committee of National Disaster Management in a meeting which was headed by the Union Home Minister Rajnath Singh. The central government has also decided to provide assistance to Himachal Pradesh and UP, which faced floods and landslides last year. Staying with that, the government notified minimum support prices are aimed at ensuring that every farmer gets a fair price for his crop. But is the system working? Why is the farmer suffering despite these pricing thresholds? As part 2 of our series, What's Ailing Rural India, Parabukhala Vora travelled to Vidarbha's Yavatmal district to find out if MSP is serving its purpose.
It's a hot day. 46 kilometers from Yavatmal, 37-year-old Shyam Purduke has just finished selling 10 quintals of cotton to a private trader at the cotton auction held by the Dioli Agricultural Produce Marketing Committee. It's been a tough year for farmers like Purduke, but what is frustrating Purduke even more is the government support price system. The cotton farmer says the Cotton Corporation of India, or CCI, has been arbitrary in its purchases of the produce this season, despite prices falling to 3,600 to 3,800 rupees a quintal, which is below the prevailing minimum support price.
15-15 दिन, 7-7 दिन, 8-8 दिन ऐसा मार्केट इनका बंद रहता है, 2 दिन या 3 दिन खाली मार्केट चालू रहता है। यानी कि गवर्नमेंट ने जो बोला है कि हम कपास खरीदेंगे तो इतने दिन वो काश्तकार लोग अपने घर में नहीं रख सकते कपास।
Purduke's disappointment stems from the fact that the CCI seems to be diverting from its track of supporting prices. With fiscal prudence being the new government's key priority, CCI is becoming a more rational buyer.
बंद रहने का कारण ये रहता है कि जो कपास हम खरीदते हैं ना, जितनी जिम्मेदारी खरीदी करने की है उसको संभालने की उतनी ही है। जो हमारे पास स्टॉक है उसको संभालने में तकलीफ जा रही है, तो नया स्टॉक लेके कैसे संभालेंगे उसको? और नुकसान बढ़ेगा, तो बहुत और नुकसान बढ़ेगा। गवर्नमेंट बर्दाश्त नहीं करती नुकसान बिल्कुल भी।
Purduke's second complaint is that minimum support prices are applied in an unfair manner. This year, the minimum support price of long staple cotton is 4,050 rupees a quintal, and that of the hybrid variety is 3,950 rupees a quintal. Purduke accuses the CCI of purchasing even higher grade cotton at the lower rate of 3,950 rupees per quintal. The Cotton Corporation has its own rationale behind the pricing.
अब जो कपास आता है उसमें ज्यादातर 80-90% कपास में मिक्सिंग आता है। अगर 5 कुंटल अच्छा है तो 2 कुंटल उसमें हल्का भी आता है, उसको उस ग्रेड में नहीं डाल सकते।
As farmers and CCI negotiate some of these sticky issues, the Modi government's move to hike the minimum support price for cotton by just 50 rupees a quintal this year has only added more fuel to the fire. The case for an increase in minimum support prices has never been stronger. Experts argue that the current minimum support prices do not reflect current realities. The Vijay Kelkar Committee report states minimum support prices are fixed 20 to 30% below the cost of cultivation. What has disillusioned experts the most is that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has backpedaled on his promise to rework the MSP formula. In his pre-election campaign last April, Modi had assured farmers that his government would rework the minimum support price formula to include the cost of production plus 50% profits, as the Swaminathan Commission formula had proposed. The move was, however, junked, with the Agriculture Ministry saying it would distort the market. Thus, as cotton farmers wait for pricing power to return and the weather gods to show mercy, the promise of Achhe Din simply seems to be a mirage in the desert.
Distress in India's farmlands. On that note, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. It's been a landmark day, freedom of speech being upheld by the Supreme Court of India. Markets continue to be volatile. We'll pick up on the action when we return tomorrow morning. Till then, from the entire team, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.